The morning sun beat down on the steel deck of the USS Perseverance, making the air shimmer with heat. It was a working ship, not a fancy one, smelling of salt, fuel, and fresh paint. Lieutenant Commander Maya Vance stood near the helicopter landing spot, her posture straight but relaxed. She watched the horizon, waiting. Her new command was a support vessel, a floating base for specialized operations. Her job was not to lead the charge, but to make sure the charge happened perfectly. She was a planner, a thinker, a person who found victory in maps, data, and quiet preparation. A distant thumping sound grew louder, cutting through the noise of the sea. A black dot appeared, quickly turning into a helicopter. It approached the ship, its wind whipping the deck crew's uniforms. Maya didn't flinch. She had done this 100 times. The helicopter landed with a final roar, and its side door slid open. The first man to jump out moved with a kind of easy, dangerous grace. He was built solid, with a face that looked like it had spent years squinting into hard sunlight and harder situations. This was Chief Warrant Officer Jocks Holt. His eyes, a pale, cool blue, scanned the deck, taking in everything and everyone in a single, quick glance. They settled on Maya. He walked over, his team of 5 other men falling in behind him like shadows. They all had that same look, quiet, confident, utterly focused. "Chief Holt," Maya said, her voice clear and steady as she offered her hand. "Welcome to the Perseverance. I'm Lieutenant Commander Vance." Holt took her hand. His grip was strong, brief, and businesslike. His eyes flicked down to the gold oak leaf on the collar of her uniform, then back to her face. A small, almost invisible smile touched his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Commander," he replied. His team stood silently. One of the younger men, a sniper with sharp eyes, let his gaze wander over the ship's crew who were securing the helicopter. The crew were good sailors, but they were different. They didn't have that coiled spring feeling the SEALs carried. "We appreciate the ride," Holt said, his tone polite but flat. "My boys are eager to get the mission briefing. Get the real work started." The phrase hung in the air. The real work. Maya simply nodded. "Of course. Briefing room is set up whenever you're ready." As Holt turned to grab his gear, he spoke quietly to his point man, a veteran with a scar along his jaw. The words were low, but the deck was small, and the wind carried them. "Intel weenies and boat drivers," he murmured. "We'll do the real work. You just try to keep up, ma'am." He said the last word like it was a joke. His point man gave a soft grunt. A sound of agreement. Maya heard it. She didn't react. She had heard versions of this her whole career. An woman, an intelligence officer, a staffer. To men like Holt, who lived in the muddy, breathless, violent moments of a mission, people like her were from a different world, a softer world. She finished her conversation with the deck officer and walked calmly toward the ship's interior. Her face showed nothing, but inside, her mind was already working. This wasn't about hurt feelings. This was a tactical problem. A leader who did not respect his chain of command was a vulnerability. And her job was to find and fix vulnerabilities. An hour later, they were all in the small, cool briefing room. Maps and satellite images glowed on screens. Maya stood at the front, explaining the exercise. It was a complex coastal surveillance drill. Her ship would provide logistics, communications, and transportation. Holt's team would be the tip of the spear, going ashore to simulate identifying and tracking a target. She laid out the initial plan, pointing to routes and timings. "For the first insertion tonight," she said, pointing to a spot on the digital map, "we recommend using this cove. The water is deep right up to the beach, and the tree cover is thick." Holt leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed. He didn't wait for her to finish. "That cove's no good," he stated, his voice leaving no room for argument. Maya paused. "The hydrographic data is recent, Chief. It's clear." "With respect," Holt said, though his tone had none, "your data is just lines on a screen. I've been on coasts like this. That creek feeds right there. It silts up. It's probably ankle-deep mud for 50 yards. My men will be carrying 200 pounds of gear. We need hard ground, not guesses from a map." He spoke as if stating a simple, obvious fact. His team watched him, then looked at Maya. The challenge was clear. Maya clicked the small remote. The screen changed, showing a different kind of image. It was a three-dimensional scan of the seafloor, colorful and detailed. "This is from a drone scan conducted 72 hours ago," she said, her voice still even. "You can see the sediment patterns here, but the main channel, right where we'd insert, holds at 15 feet. The hard bottom is right there." She pointed to a specific blue line on the scan. Holt glanced at the image and shrugged, a dismissive movement of his shoulders. "Gadgetry. I trust my eyes and my experience. We'll go in here, at the rocky point." He tapped a different spot on the map, a more exposed, longer swim. Maya held his gaze for a second. She could order him to follow the plan. But she knew that wasn't how you won the respect of a man like Holt. An order given now would be followed with resentment. And resentment got people killed in real operations. "Understood," she said simply, closing her briefing folder. "The Perseverance will support your chosen insertion point. We will be standing by." The meeting ended. As the SEALs filed out, Holt gave her one last look, a mix of curiosity and confirmed belief. He thought her calmness was weakness. He thought her data was a crutch. Maya watched them go, a small, thoughtful frown on her face. The real exercise, she understood, had already begun. It wasn't just about the mission on the map. It was about the mission right here, on this ship. And she had no intention of losing it. The night air over the water was cold and sharp, a shocking change from the day's heat. The only sounds were the quiet hum of the ship's engines and the slosh of black water against the hull. On the deck, shadows moved with a purpose. The SEAL team was preparing their small, rubber-rating craft for the first part of the exercise. Lieutenant Commander Vance stood on the bridge, watching them through a pair of night vision binoculars. She saw Chief Holt moving among his men. He didn't speak much. A touch on her shoulder, a low grunt of instruction, a nod. Every movement was efficient, practiced 1,000 times. They were like a single machine made of 6 parts. She respected their skill. It was obvious, and real dot down on the deck. Holt checked the engine on the small boat one last time. His point man, the veteran with the scar, leaned in. "Think she's watching from up there?" he asked, his voice a quiet rumble. Holt didn't look up at the bridge windows. "Let her watch. She can see how a real team operates. Just remember, we're on our own once we push off. Their job is to be here when we call. That's it." A few minutes later, the small black boat slipped away from the big ship's side. Its engine was a low electric whisper, quickly swallowed by the darkness and the fog that was beginning to roll in. On the bridge, Vance lowered her binoculars. The fog was thicker than forecasted. It changed things. She turned to the young sailor, manning the radio. "Keep the channel completely clear for Red Team. Nothing goes out unless it comes from them or it's an emergency." Back in the small boat, the world had shrunk to a circle of damp, chilly gray. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. The men navigated by the glowing numbers on a wrist-mounted GPS. Holt was focused, his eyes straining against the gloom. They were heading for the rocky point he had insisted on, the exposed one, not the cove the lieutenant commander had suggested. After a long, quiet ride, the GPS told them they had arrived. The boat nudged gently against something. not rock. It was a thick, soft barrier of reeds and rotting logs, trapped in a shallow, muddy inlet. This wasn't the rocky point. The fog and the current had pushed them off course without them realizing it. Holt muttered a low curse. "All right, we're off. This is messy. Silent drill. We go on foot from here." The men slipped over the side into water that was only waist deep, then knee deep, then thick, sucking mud that clutched at their boots. It was hard, slow, exhausting work. They were laden with heavy packs and weapons for the exercise. Every step was a fight. By the time they reached solid ground, they were caked in stinking mud and breathing hard. They had lost 20 precious minutes and a lot of energy before the exercise had even properly begun. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the Perseverance, Vance was tracking their progress. A small, separate screen on her console showed a slow-moving green dot. It was a passive tracker on their boat, activated for safety. She saw it stop short of the rocky point, in the exact area of the silted-up creek mouth Holt had mentioned in the briefing. She said nothing. She just watched, her face calm. The SEALs moved inland, completing the first leg of their simulated mission, planting a tracking device on a fake target. It went smoothly. Their skills were incredible. But the hard, wet start had taken a toll. They were behind schedule. As dawn began to lighten the sky to a dirty gray, they arrived at their extraction point, a different beach, code-named Lighthouse. They were tired, cold, and muddy. Holt keyed his radio. Read actual to Perseverance. At Lighthouse. Ready for pickup. The reply from the ship was immediate, but it wasn't what he expected. It was Vance's voice, calm and clear. Perseverance copies. Stand by, read actual. The pickup will be at Cove Zulu. I say again, Cove Zulu. Over. Holt's jaw tightened. Cove Zulu was the original spot she had suggested, the one he had dismissed. It was a kilometer down the coast, over rough, rocky terrain. Going there meant more time, more effort. He pressed the transmit button, irritation in his voice. Perseverance, this is a needless deviation. We are at Lighthouse now. The fog is lifting. Extract us here. There was a short pause. Then her voice came back, still calm, but firm. It was not a suggestion. Read actual. Extraction point is Cove Zulu. The tactical picture has changed. It is secure. Lighthouse is not. Proceed to Zulu. On the beach, his team looked at him. They were wiped out. The point man shook his head, wiping mud from his face. She's making us hike, Chief, because of the cove thing. Holt felt a hot spike of anger. This felt like a punishment, a power play from an officer who had been embarrassed. He wanted to argue, but the rules of the exercise were clear. The ship was command. He growled into the radio. Copy all. Proceeding to Zulu. The trudge down the coast was miserable. The rocks were slippery. Their wet gear chafed. By the time they reached Cove Zulu, the sun was fully up, burning off the last of the fog, and what they saw made them stop. Cove Zulu was perfect. It was a deep, clear-cut inlet of dark blue water with a steep, gravel beach that went right up to the tree line. No mud, no reeds. A small boat from the Perseverance was already there, waiting, its crew looking fresh and alert. But more importantly, on the high ground overlooking the lighthouse beach, their original pickup spot, they could now see in the morning light the clear signs of an enemy observation post. It was just a wooden platform with a camera for the exercise, but it was real. If they had been extracted at Lighthouse, the opposing force would have seen everything. Holt stood at the edge of the clean gravel, his stinking mud drying on his legs. He stared at the hidden observation post, then down at the perfect cove. The lieutenant commander hadn't been punishing him. She had been protecting the mission. She had seen the threat he couldn't see in the dark and the fog. The boat crew chief called out, "Good morning, gentlemen. Ready for a ride?" Holt didn't answer. He walked down the gravel and stepped into the boat, the mud from his boots leaving dirty marks on the clean deck. He didn't look at his men. He just sat down, staring at the floor. The quiet in the boat on the way back to the ship wasn't the quiet of a focused team. It was the heavy, thick quiet of a man who had just realized he might have been very, very wrong. The hot water from the shower felt good, washing away the salt, the sweat, and the stubborn, gritty mud. Chief Holt stood under the stream, his head bowed. He could still hear the lieutenant commander's calm voice in his ear. Cove Zulu. It is secure. Lighthouse is not. He replayed the moment he saw that observation post in his mind. It was a simple wooden platform, but it felt like a giant sign pointing directly at his mistake. He had been so sure. He had trusted his gut, his memory of other coasts, over her charts and scans. And his gut had been wrong. His team had paid for it with an exhausting, muddy slog. More than that, in a real situation, they might have paid for it with their lives. The thought sat in his stomach like a cold stone. Later, dressed in a clean uniform, he walked down the narrow passageway of the ship. He needed to see her. He didn't know what he would say, but he couldn't just let it sit. As he turned a corner near the intelligence spaces, he heard voices from an open doorway. It was the lieutenant commander's voice, and she was speaking to one of her young sailors, a woman who handled the communications drones. The important thing wasn't being right, Vance was saying, her tone patient, instructional. It was that the chief made a call based on his experience. In the field, I have to trust that. My job is to give him the information, so his experience and my information can make one good picture. He didn't have the updated silt scan. That's on me for not making it clearer. Holt stopped, frozen just outside the doorway. She wasn't mocking him. She wasn't complaining to her crew about the stubborn seal. She was taking part of the blame herself. The cold stone in his gut grew heavier. He stepped back quietly and walked away. He wasn't ready to talk to her anymore. The next phase of the exercise began after a quick meal. This part was more complex. It involved tracking a moving target through a simulated village on the coast. The team was in the briefing room again. Maps of the small, fake town were up on the screens. It had narrow streets, a market square, and a few two-story buildings. Chief Holt had already worked out a plan. It was a good plan. A direct one. "We go in fast and quiet here," he said, pointing to the south end of the village. "We use the alleyways to move north. The target is likely holed up in this building here." He tapped a structure near the center. "We surround it, simulate the call-out, and extract him. Simple. Clean." Lieutenant Commander Vance had been silent, studying the maps. She zoomed in on one particular alley. It was a main route from the south, right into the heart of the village. "This corridor here," she said. "It's the most direct path. Your team would naturally funnel into it." Holt nodded. "Exactly. Fastest route to the objective." Vance turned to a different screen, pulling up a feed that looked like lines of random text. It was simulated signal traffic, part of the exercise's pretend enemy communications. "I've been monitoring the opposition's chatter. They're using simple code, but the pattern is clear. They keep mentioning the Shepherd and the South Gate, and they're very active in this building here." She pointed to a structure that had a clear rooftop view right down the length of that main alley. She looked at Holt. "Chief, they're baiting you. They want you to come up that alley. It's a perfect shooting gallery. They see you enter the village from the south. They'll be waiting." Holt looked at the map, then at the communication lines. He shook his head slowly. A small, hard smile appeared on his face. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a hunter who thought he was being told how to hunt. "With all due respect, Lieutenant Commander," he said, the old tone creeping back into his voice. The embarrassment from the morning was turning into a need to reassert himself. "This is what we do. We thrive on predictable. Let them set their trap. My team is good enough to spring it, take out the lookouts, and still get to the target before they know what hit them. We move faster than they can react." He saw his men straighten a little in their chairs. They believed in him. They believed in their speed, their violence of action. This was their world, not the world of screens and code. Vance held his gaze. Her eyes were serious. "Chief, it's not about your skill. It's about their setup. They have the terrain. They have the sightlines. They're expecting you to do exactly what you want to do. Please consider an approach from the west, along the waterline. It's longer, but it's concealed." Holt leaned on the table. "Ma'am, you handle the patterns. I'll handle the people in the pattern. A longer approach gives them more time to prepare. Speed is security here." His voice was final. He had made his decision. There was a long, quiet moment. Vance looked from his determined face to the faces of his team, all set in similar lines of confidence. She gave a single slow nod. "Understood," she said, her voice flat. "The Perseverance will support your plan. You have command of the ground op." An hour later, under the dim light of a cloud-covered moon, the SEAL team crept into the southern edge of the training village. It was built of old containers and wooden structures, feeling eerily real. As Holt had predicted, the alley was the clearest path. They moved into it, shadows among shadows. They were halfway down its length when a harsh, electronic buzzer shattered the silence. Bright red lights flashed from the rooftop Vance had pointed to. A loudspeaker voice, flat and robotic, echoed in the confined space. Asterisk, asterisk. Exercise halt. Exercise halt. Red team. You are engaged. Simulated casualty. Point man. Asterisk, asterisk. The veteran with the scar froze, lowering his weapon. He was out. A simulated sniper had taken him. Holt's heart hammered against his ribs. Back. Take cover. He hissed. They scrambled, but the alley was a trap, just as she had said. The buzzer sounded again. Asterisk, asterisk. Exercise halt. Simulated casualty. Medic. Asterisk, asterisk. Another man was out. From their hidden positions, they tried to return fire, but the angles were terrible. The opposing force had them pinned perfectly. Another buzz. Another light. A third team member was hit in less than 2 minutes. It was over. The robotic voice announced the grim result. Asterisk, asterisk. Mission failure. Red team neutralized. Target not secured. Asterisk, asterisk. Standing in the dark, smelly alley, smelling the damp wood and dust, Chief Holt felt a hollow emptiness. He had led his team, his brilliant, capable team, right into a textbook ambush. He had been so focused on proving his way was the right way, on showing that action beat thinking, that he had walked them all into a defeat. He looked at his men, their faces dim in the flashing red light. They weren't looking at the enemy on the roof. They were looking at him. And in that moment, he heard the lieutenant commander's voice again, not from a radio, but from the briefing room. It was calm, clear, and absolutely right. Asterisk, they're baiting you. It's a perfect shooting gallery. Asterisk had been so desperate not to be wrong about the cove that he had made a much bigger mistake. He had confused her warning for a challenge. And now his team was dead. The heavy quiet that settled on them was worse than any noise. It was the sound of trust broken. The buzzing stopped. The flashing red lights went dark, leaving the training village in a deep, uncomfortable silence. The only light now came from the dull moon above, making the faces of Chief Holt's team look pale and tired. They lowered their weapons, the fight gone out of them. They were, according to the rules of the exercise, no longer alive. Holt stood in the middle of the alley, the feeling of emptiness in his chest so complete it was like a physical ache. He could feel the eyes of his men on him, not with anger, but with a quiet, stunned confusion. They had never failed like this. Not in a training exercise. Not when it mattered. He had failed them. The radio on his vest crackled to life. It was the voice of the exercise controller, a neutral officer back on the ship. Red Actual, this is Control. Confirm your status. Over. Holt raised the radio to his mouth, his voice rough. Control, Red Actual. We are neutralized. Mission is a scrub. Saying the words felt like swallowing glass. Confirmed, Red Actual. Stand by for extraction from your location. Just as Holt was about to acknowledge, another voice cut smoothly across the channel. It was calm, clear, and utterly in command. Perseverance Actual to Control. Request stand by on that extraction. It was Lieutenant Commander Vance. On the bridge of the ship, miles away, she had been watching it all. Every movement, every signal, every simulated death. She had seen the trap close. There was a pause from Control. Perseverance Actual, this is Control. The ground team is neutralized. Exercise protocol dictates. Vance interrupted, her tone respectful but firm, leaving no room for argument. Control, request activation of contingency Ghost Protocol. Authority Zulu 7. I say again, Ghost Protocol, Authority Zulu 7. Down in the alley, Holt heard this. His head jerked up. Ghost Protocol? He had never heard of it. He looked at his point man, who just shook his head, equally lost. What was she doing? The mission was over. They were dead. On the ship, the control room went quiet for a moment. Then the controller's voice came back, different now. Formal. Control copies all. Authority Zulu 7 confirmed. Ghost Protocol is activated. The field is yours. Perseverance Actual. Back in the village, Holt and his team listened, completely in the dark. They were spectators at their own failure. Then, a new sound. It wasn't from the village. It was a low, deep hum from the water. It grew closer. From the western shoreline, the side of the village that faced the dark sea, two new shapes appeared on the water. They were small, rigid, inflatable boats, but they were moving fast and silent, with hardly any wake. They weren't sealed boats. They were from the Perseverance. Holt moved to the end of the alley, peering through a broken window frame. He saw the boats glide right up to the rocky beach. Figures hopped out. They weren't dressed like SEALs. They wore simpler gear. He recognized them. They were part of the ship's crew. The boat drivers. The support guys. The men and women he had basically ignored since he arrived. But they didn't move like boat drivers now. They moved with purpose, spreading out along the waterline. One of them carried a large, boxy device on his back. He aimed it at the building with the rooftop where the enemy sniper was. A high-pitched whine pierced the air, followed by a series of rapid, clicking pulses. It was a simulated electronic warfare weapon, a non-lethal emitter designed to disable communications and sensors. Immediately, the radio in Holt's ear fizzed with confused static. Then a simulated broadcast from the exercise's opposing force. Command, this is Blue 1. We have total systems failure. I say again, we are blind. What's happening? The enemy on the roof was now confused, cut off, and completely exposed from a direction they had never considered. The ship's crew, using the cover of the building itself, moved in. One team laid down simulated cover fire with laser tags. Another team sprinted to the back of the target building, the one Holt was supposed to have secured. In less than 90 seconds, a new voice came over the exercise channel. It was one of the young sailors from the Perseverance, her voice tight with excitement, but controlled. Perseverance ground team to control. Package is secured. I repeat, the high-value target is secured. No simulated casualties. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, the controller's voice returned, sounding almost amused. Control copies all. Exercise is terminated. All units stand down. Return to extraction point Alpha. Holt slowly lowered himself to sit on a broken crate in the alley. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on him so hard he could barely breathe. The lieutenant, commander, hadn't just predicted his failure. She had planned for it. Ghost Protocol was a hidden layer, a secret backup plan that only the commanding officer knew about. She had not trusted his plan, but she had trusted in the mission's success enough to have a whole other team ready. And who was on that team? Her so-called boat drivers. People he had dismissed. People she had trained, prepared, and held in reserve for the exact moment he fell. She had used his arrogance, his predictable charge, as the distraction. While the enemy was focused on finishing him off in the alley, her real team had come in from the sea, from the direction he had refused to consider, and finished the job. His point man sat down heavily next to him. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, the veteran let out a long, slow breath. "She played us," he said, not with anger, but with a kind of stunned respect. "She used our whole op as the bait." Holt just nodded. He felt completely hollowed out. Every belief he had that action was everything, that planning was for people who couldn't fight, that her rank was just a title they shattered around him in that dark alley. She hadn't beaten him with a rule book. She had outthought him on his own battlefield. She had seen 3 moves ahead when he was only thinking about the next step. The ride back to the ship in the Perseverance's boat was silent. The sailors who had just pulled off the Ghost Protocol operation didn't boast. They were quiet, professional, just doing their job. That made it worse. To them, it was just Tuesday. To Holt, it was the day his entire understanding of command was turned upside down. He stared at the deck of the boat, the clean gray paint, a contrast to the mud still stuck in the treads of his boots. He wasn't thinking about the mission anymore. He was thinking about what he was going to say to her. And for the first time, he had no idea what the words should be. The trip back to the ship felt longer than any journey Holt had ever taken. The low hum of the boat's engine was the only sound. His men sat around him, their gear piled at their feet. No one looked at each other. The sailors who had pulled off the Ghost Protocol rescue sat quietly at the helm, focused on the water. Their calm professionalism was like a mirror, and what it reflected back at Holt was not a flattering picture. He had always believed the world was divided into 2 kinds of people, those who talked about the fight and those who were in it. He had placed Lieutenant Commander Vance firmly in the first group. Now, he understood she belonged to a third group he hadn't even considered, those who understood the whole fight, the one that happened on maps, in radio signals, and in the minds of the enemy, long before a single shot was ever fired. And she had won that fight, using his own team as a piece on her board. The Perseverance loomed out of the darkness, its lights a bright welcome he didn't feel he deserved. Climbing the ladder to the deck, his body felt heavy, not from tiredness, but from the weight of his mistake. The deck crew was there, but they didn't offer the usual nods or quiet jokes. The mood was different. Respectful, but tense. Word traveled fast on a ship. Holt told his team to stow their gear and get some rest. They moved off, a quiet, dispirited group. He stood for a moment, alone on the deck, the cool night air doing nothing to clear his head. He knew what he had to do. He had to find her. He found Lieutenant Commander Vance not on the bridge, but in the small mess hall. It was late, and the room was empty except for her. She was sitting at a table with a mug of coffee, staring at a simple paper map of the coastline, her brow slightly furrowed. She wasn't celebrating. She was thinking, already processing what came next. She looked up as he entered. Her face showed no surprise, no victory, no anger. It was just calm, open. That calmness was worse than any glare. Holt stopped a few feet from the table. He had rehearsed a dozen things in his head on the ride, over excuses, explanations, a strained apology. Now, standing there, all those words evaporated. All that was left was the raw, ugly truth. "Ma'am," he began, his voice sounding rough and unfamiliar to his own ears. He forced himself to meet her gaze. "I underestimated the battlefield." "Your battlefield." He didn't say he was sorry. For men like him, the word sorry was for small things, like bumping into someone. This failure was too big for that word. He needed her to understand that he saw it now. Vance was quiet for a moment. She glanced down at the map, then back at him. "Sit down, Chief," she said, not as an order, but as an offer. He pulled out a chair and sat, his movements stiff. "You trusted your experience," she said, her tone matter-of-fact. "There's honor in that. I need you to trust it. But I also need you to trust mine. Not because of the rank on my collar, but because my experience is different. It's not better. It's just different. That alley, it wasn't a mystery. It was a pattern. A predictable one. I saw it as a challenge," Holt admitted, the words coming out hard. "After the cove, I thought you were trying to prove a point." "I was," she said simply, taking a sip of her coffee. "But the point wasn't that I was right and you were wrong. The point was that we have to be right together. You were looking at the door you wanted to kick in. I was looking at all the other doors and the windows and what was on the roof." She leaned forward slightly. "You asked my crew to keep up. But this isn't a race, Chief. It's a symphony. Sometimes the strings lead. Sometimes the brass. But everyone has to play the same sheet of music." Holt nodded slowly, the analogy settling in. He had been playing his instrument as loud as he could, drowning out everyone else. "The Ghost Protocol team? Your sailors? They were good. Really good." A small, genuine smile touched Vance's lips for the first time. "They are. That's Petty Officer Riley on the emitter. She's a chess champion. Sees moves ahead. And the one who secured the target? That's Logistics Specialist Chun. He's a rock climber. Finds routes no one else sees." She looked at him steadily. "They're not SEALs. They don't have to be. They're something else. And they're on your team, if you let them be." That was the core of it, Holt realized. He hadn't seen a team. He had seen his team and her staff. He hadn't seen the Perseverance as a single weapon. He had seen it as a taxi for his weapon. "The mission isn't just the bullet, Chief," she said, echoing his own unspoken thoughts from a different angle. "It's the whole cartridge. The powder, the casing, the primer. My job is to make sure the whole round is loaded right, so when you fire, it hits exactly where you aim. You can't do one without the other." Holt sat with that, the last of his resistance melting away. It wasn't about submission. It was about completion. "What do you need from me?" he asked. It was the only question that mattered now. "Next briefing is at 0600 for the after-action review," she said, her tone shifting back to the practical. "I need you there, and I need you to speak first. Not to take blame. To lay out what happened from your view, so everyone learns. Your team, my crew. We all learn. Then, she said, folding her map, we plan the next exercise. Together, she stood up, picking up her mug. The conversation was over. She had given him a path back, not to favor, but to usefulness. To being part of the orchestra. As she walked to the door, Holt spoke again. Ma'am? She turned. Thank you, he said. The words felt inadequate, but they were the only ones he had left. Vance gave a single, acknowledging nod. Welcome to the team, Chief. The next morning at 0600, the briefing room was packed. The SEAL team was there, clean but subdued. The Perseverance's key crew members were there, including Riley and Shun. The air was thick with anticipation. Lieutenant Commander Vance stood at the front. Chief Holt will begin the debrief, she said, and without any fanfare. She took a seat among her crew. All eyes turned to Holt. He felt the weight of them. The curiosity, the residual disappointment from his own men. He took a breath and stood. He didn't hide behind jargon or excuses. He walked to the map, pointed to the alley, and explained, in simple, honest terms, how he had walked into a trap. He mentioned the lieutenant commander's warning. He didn't call it Ghost Protocol. He called it the contingency plan. He praised the actions of the ship's crew who executed it. When we focus only on our own piece of the fight, he concluded, his voice growing stronger, we become a target, not a team. From now on, we see the whole board. When he finished and sat down, the room was quiet for a beat. Then Vance stood, not to correct him, but to build on what he said. She started talking about communication protocols, about shared maps, about integrating ASEAL's gut feeling with a drone's eye view. As the two of them began to discuss the next steps. Their dialogue easy and focused, the room began to change. The SEALs started to lean in, listening to the sailors' capabilities with new interest. The sailors sat a little taller. The wall that had been between them began to crumble, brick by brick. It wasn't a flashy moment. There were no handshakes or speeches. But as the meeting went on, a new sound emerged in the room. It was the sound of one team, finally finding its rhythm. It was the sound of the whole cartridge being loaded.